The 1800s was a time of innovation and revolution where everything from farming to politics was rapidly advancing in knowledge and technology, including paleontology as seen in the Bone Wars. The Bone Wars was a thrilling, dynamic series of fossil discoveries, sabotages, and media disputes between American paleontologists Edward Drinker Cope and Othniel Charles Marsh. The Bone Wars between Othniel Charles Marsh and Edward Drinker Cope led to a huge revolution in paleontology in America. The rivalry between the two led to the discovery of many fossils, made paleontology more popular among the masses, and generated huge funding for the field. This, in turn, made science more fact-oriented, less focused on religion. However, the unethical practices of the two criticism and reform within the rules of paleontology. Paleontology is the study of ancient life through recordings and fossils. During the early 19th century, paleontology enthusiasts filled up curiosity cabinets with fossils. It was during this time that the English paleontologist Mary Anning was discovering marine animals in Lyme Regis, England. It was a few years later in the United States that Marsh and Cope began their respective journeys. Edward Drinker Cope, from a young age, was fascinated with paleontology. Growing up in a wealthy Quaker household, he was able to pursue his ambition sooner, publishing his first paper at 19 years old. Marsh, on the other hand, grew up in a poor farming family. After gaining his degree from the Phillips Academy, Marsh's wealthy uncle, George Peabody, funded his education at Yale and later his expeditions and studies. This path of a paleontological revolution was not completely intentional, if no intent at all. The Bone Wars started in 1877, but Marsh and Cope met before then in late 1863 or early 1864 in Berlin, Germany. At the time, both of whom were studying abroad to avoid getting into the American Civil War. Soon after their interaction, they became friends, naming their discoveries after each other. Then, in 1868, Marsh was invited to see Cope's most recent fossil reconstruction, Elasmosaurus. Marsh noticed that Cope placed the head of the animal on the tail, and then later confirmed his theory by another paleontologist, Joseph Leidy. This public humiliation caused the bitter to the death rivalry. The soon discovery of fossils in the American West sparked a race to find more fossils from the other person. Two of the discoveries in 1877, Camarasaurus supremus, later named and bought by Cope, and Apatosaurus ajax, later named and described by Marsh, started the major competition, with each being backed with fossils around the same time. The often sometimes weekly discoveries between Cope and Marsh marked a period of revolution in paleontology, with both paleontologists publishing new findings normally within a few days of each other. The two rivals would frequently use each other's findings to aid them in their own, as seen in Apatosaurus. Apatosaurus, being discovered and named by Marsh in 1877, had a long, lengthy body with no skull to the body, which is common among sauropods. Marsh used Cope's Camarasaurus skull to fill in the missing pieces of information. This was later disproven in the 1970s with an Apatosaurus skull from 1909. This discovery sent the paleontological community in shock, so there's now a whole family of dinosaurs whose skulls were wrong. Yet, this was not the most recent revolution they caused, as that would take place in 2015, 136 years after the initial discovery of Brontosaurus in 1879. 2 years after the discovery of Apatosaurus, Marsh discovered a new dinosaur, Brontosaurus. He described it as if its own separate species, but in 1903, paleontologist Elmer Riggs decided that Brontosaurus was a young Apatosaurus. This mistake was later disproven in 2015 after new research. The Golden Triangle is a range in the Morrison Formation where Othniel Charles Marsh and Edward Drinker Cope had most of their expeditions, including the ones that they found Camarasaurus and Apatosaurus in. The borders are debated on their locations, but most commonly Como Bluff, Wyoming to the north, Canyon City, Colorado to the south, and somewhere in Nebraska to the east. When dinosaurs were first found here, it caught the two opponents' attention. They both rushed out men and teams to find dinosaurs and other things as fast as they could. Instead of keeping it civil, they started to sabotage each other. Both Cope and Marsh implanted spies into each other's camps and vandalized the other's quarries. In the midst of all this chaos, the greatest burst of American science appeared. While a lot of the Bone Wars' popularity came from the new discoveries, quite a bit of it came from how petty these two grown men were to each other, almost as if they're 5-year-olds. For Marsh, it was not really about getting a new discovery for himself, but more about ruining his rival's public appearance. At the moment of a folly from Cope, Marsh would pounce upon it, almost as he was patiently waiting for it to happen, like a predator does to prey. This is not the sole case of them showing children's behavior, both sides of this feud being extremely wealthy. They had the money to fund these trips and one up each other, but Cope and Marsh became extremely petty over each other's success, and the news outlets ate this up, so you constantly talk about the Bone Wars, further aiding their popularity. In 1890, Marsh tried to take Cope's fossil collection, claiming that Cope used government money to fund the expeditions. Later Cope unveiled that Marsh corrupted the American Geological Association and used the government to fund the expeditions. This then started a 2-week-long media battle between the two, splitting colleges and universities in half over who to support. This new rush in prehistoric fauna and paleontological information caused a newfound popularity in paleontology. This popularity came mainly from how mainstream the Bone Wars were. When paleontology was spreading to America in the early 19th century, it inspired a new generation of paleontologists, including Cope and Marsh, who then inspired a new generation of paleontologists on their own. Their newfound passion in paleontology was where it really started the captivating science of American paleontology. While they become bigger and bigger in popularity, so did the science that they pursued. This uprising of a new science here in America cultivated a new system of American pride with it and create also a new identity for the United States, as now they're able to compete with European sciences. It was not only the higher class that had access to education that was fascinated with paleontology, as the public also found an interest in paleontology. From all of the revolutions and reactions that the Bone Wars caused, there was bound to be reforms in paleontology. Originally built on a friendship, the Bone Wars took a nasty turn downhill due to their egos. This further impacted paleontology as it was never about the discoveries, which made there be errors that lasted over a century, as seen in Brontosaurus. From the Bone Wars, there's a remaking of paleontology, but in science as a whole, trying to push humanists in the field. Even though Cope and Marsh were extremely wealthy, both of them died in shambles after the war because of how they were always funding expeditions and hiring crew. This is seen today, but it's much toned down to what it was, as we can see that in digs sponsored by universities. But they limit to the power of one individual that controls the branch. In the end of the war, both paleontologists try to claim victory, with both Marsh and Cope claiming victories, with Marsh naming over 80 new species and Cope publishing over 1,400 articles, both of them setting a record yet to be broken. Even though they claimed victory over each other, neither of them really won, as they both dedicated their whole lives to this, led to health issues later on, then also losing most of their wealth. This to-the-death rivalry sparked a new reform within paleontology, causing disagreements to no longer cause this much damage to everyone. In the grand schemes of things, they were never able to forgive each other or come to an agreement that they did all that for science, with both of them being praised in their biographies. Cope's biography came out with a little bit of irony to it, while Marsh's came out with a more truthful index of what his side was like. The Bone Wars showed that in the midst of a blazing fire, a revolution, a reaction, and a reform will rise from the ashes, whether it's through their juvenile disagreements, frequent discoveries, or groundbreaking research. Cope and Marsh made American paleontology what it is today. Even though Cope and Marsh split people in half over whose side they are on, what everyone can agree on is that the Bone Wars caused a revolution, a reaction, and reform in American paleontology.